are live at base today, and we're with, tell us your name and what you do.
I'm Julia Beckley, and I just took on the position of directing and managing the base adaptive team for 2022. 2021 was our inaugural year, and so Matt asked me to lead our team for 2022. So that's kind of where I'm at, supporting base in many ways, but just growing adaptive support.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Obviously,
awesome.
You're an adaptive athlete. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I have some serious medical conditions that when I was younger, I was still able to compete in an able-bodied manner. Definitely able-bodied passing would be a way to describe that. So I was a state champ tennis player in Colorado, competed in every sport I could growing up. By age 8, I had my first broken bone. And then between 8 and now I'm 27, I've broken over 42 bones.
Wow.
So I'm a little bit different than what you would expect, because I think a lot of people assume that if you're competing in a chair, you are then completely reliant on a day chair. And especially with this past Paralympics, there's been like a little bit of a movement of like, hey, actually, this is just an adaptation. So you may be able to do ambulatory things in different ways, but you belong in sport here because this is like what you're able to excel in. So there's a tennis player out of, I think, Australia who breaks bones too, and she competes in tennis. There's,
What condition is that?
It's called hypophosphatasia. So breaking down that word, it means I don't have enough alkaline phosphatase, which is an enzyme that helps you metabolize your calcium, your magnesium, everything to build that bone. So because I don't have that, I have softer bones equivalently and break easily, especially stress fractures.
Okay.
Yeah.
Explain the breathing, if you don't mind. I'm trying to put you on the spot.
So right now I don't have a tube in, but I have a trach because I am allergic to everything. And it's not just like an allergy, it's a systemic issue where the cells that are responsible for a primary immune response, like if you hit your hand, you're going to get some immune response to that.
Yeah.
And part of that is going to be mast cells, which release histamine. And that histamine is what makes it red. It makes it swell up a little bit. My body doesn't have the control to stop that process. And it starts it inappropriately too. So I have cholinergic and cold urticaria, which means I'm allergic to both heat and cold. And all the other things, my muscles just react poorly to lots of environments, which means I have a trach for an airway because previously I was spending hundreds of days in the ICU every year. And so now this allows me to be safer and still be able to do the things I love, like
because
sport.
You get more oxygen?
Nope, it's just an emergency airway. So that allergic reaction is what happens with mast cells. And so that means I lose my upper airway and it's really dangerous. So I've been dealing that for a long time, and each season brings a new challenge. But yeah, that's kind of my day-to-day. I have central line, so I have to take medications, whether I'm on course, off course, whatever for that, and then my airway and everything. So, yeah.
And now you're in charge of the base adaptive team.
Yeah.
So talk about, what does that mean?
So we're kind of still figuring out and defining exactly what that is. And when I say we, I mean my peers on the team. As Matt likes to say, he gave us the keys to the castle, and it's incredible because what we can do as an adaptive team, piggybacking off of a major organization like BASE, is that we can support athletes in a whole new way at a lower reduced cost to those athletes. It's not like competing with other organizations in terms of like, oh, well, we want you to be on the team and not that team. It's very much so, hey, we have this opportunity to provide nutrition and hydration at a reduced cost that is much more affordable for adaptive athletes, because one of the biggest challenges we all face is the financial side of being an athlete.
Right. So you'll still work with an athlete in tandem, for instance?
Yeah, so tennis is a good friend.
Right.
I am currently the president of my team Triumph, which is kind of like a sister organization out of Denver. That's a big board. So I kind of cover all areas of adaptive sport, and then it just so happens that base really aligns with like what I'm doing. So on one spectrum end, I have very independent athletes who have something that they're adapting around. Maybe it's cerebral palsy to a lighter extent, blindness, other different issues like that. And then the other end have the extreme adaptations, not extreme, the higher need for support. So, doing our marathons that athletes get pushed in and getting to create that team environment. So the top 3 things I'm working on for 2022 is we're collectively as a para-sport in Colorado building our junior national team for 2022. And base definitely makes that possible. Base makes like creating a team for those kids possible. So you'll see me around the state. I'll be in a different city all the time and just showing up and being active.
Well, how about, that's amazing, first of all. How does it feel to be an adaptive athlete employed to help adaptive athletes?
Crazy. Right now it's not a like full-time position at all. But I mean, I'm passionate and like I've always been passionate about doing what I'm my best. But it's incredible the amount of opportunity that comes from being an adaptive athlete on the base team. One, because everywhere I go in the country for a race, there's another base teammate. 2, it's also this concept of like base is known really well in the tri community, especially. So when I say, oh, I'm a part of the base adaptive team, or I say I manage and direct the base adaptive team, it allows me to open doors a little bit more than average, and it gives me a little bit more support to do that. So definitely mentoring from Matt and Jay and LJ and the whole team and Larry. So that's incredible. And it pushes me. Like I get the feedback of like, hey, this is a good thing you're doing. Go, keep going.
What were you doing before?
So 2 years ago, I started as a chair athlete. My first year was about running with Achilles International, which is my home spot by far, Monday nights, Wash Park in Denver. And then by, I want to say spring of 2020, I was picking up ambassador roles for like Honey Stinger, just different organizations.
That's how you were making a living?
No, I don't make a living at all from this right now.
But how about before? What some jobs that you've had?
Yeah, so my first job in a long time was working as a phlebotomist. It's weird because I'm an athlete who can go and do a 100-mile race over whatever hours, 30 to 60, and I can navigate that, but it's really hard for workplaces to navigate, when you're here, you work incredibly. You outwork everyone, but you also have to have the ability to leave. And so like, where do you balance reliability with benefit? So I think that's one of the perks of COVID that came out is there's a movement of chair individuals who are doing professions that they previously said aren't possible. Nursing's kind of my long-term goal. And there's a couple of seated nurses that are incredible that are making those waves. So I think like being adaptive, especially with bases, like sharing that you have a purpose, you belong. The most isolating thing that can ever happen, and the hardest thing I would say, is when, whether it's a physician, an athlete, a race director, whatever, says, you're the only one, or you're the only one, it's really not worth doing anything, which I'm super appreciative and grateful for the amount of support I have in Colorado. My own sport, which is push rim, track and field, and marathon, ultramarathon distances, there isn't a lot of presence right now. So it's a unique challenge that like I get to go and consult with the other organizations like, hey, here's what it looks like. So actually for the first time ever in Northern Colorado, we had a wheelchair push rim wave. And
push room wave?
Yep. So that means that there are actual specific like start for the push rim athletes, which Green Events is the company that supported that, already had the ability for athletes to come and participate and compete. Like, there were awards. But then this was a very intentional, we had 5 chair athletes come out to do a start. And there's something about having chair athletes on a course that changes the dynamic. Some people struggle because they've never seen it before, and others are like, oh yeah, this is what happens in New York City, Boston, all these things. So yeah, that's just kind of start where you are, using what I can and going for it.
So tell me, you mentioned an ultra. So what would be an ultra push room or push event? What does that mean?
I laugh because the responses I normally get to, like, you do ultramarathons is, you don't belong doing that, you're sick.
Oh.
But ultramarathons is just finding the courses that are most accessible for me.
Like, how long is that, though?
I just did 100 in March.
100 miles?
Mm-hmm.
In a chair?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
No motor?
No motor. No.
Really?
Yeah. So when I joined Achilles International is a nonprofit org that has workout groups across country and just different aspects of supporting adaptive athletes. When I joined them, the people who are adding 5 to 10 miles a week to their schedule by, like, going and running with adaptive athletes are people who already are doing crazy whatever and have passion. So I became friends with a few people who have done hundreds, and it was just kind of a theme that, like, everyone in that group at some point will do an ultra. Like, there's just no doubt that that's kind of like what we do. We have the Taco Bell 50K coming up.
Taco Bell 50?
Yeah, it's 31 miles around Denver from Taco Bell to Taco Bell, and you're required to eat one thing at every stop. And then you have, like, there's, like, some different components.
That's awesome.
So going back to what you're saying, so for me, ultramarathons, it's just like, wherever can I show up and push myself? Like, what? And the community is phenomenal. I would never really get to rub shoulders with, like, the best of the best with my tennis career that I had. Like, it was amazing. It made me an athlete. Like, everything I've done is about, like, okay, where do I find my joy? It's being an athlete. But one, on the able-bodied side, I get to be side by side with the top ultra runners in the world. Like, Camille Herron and I were on the jackpot course together with Zach Bitter, and that's really cool. When Camille runs by you and says, "You got this," and then I run by Camille and say, "We got this," like, that's a whole different level of, like, oh, we're experiencing the same challenges at the same time. I'm having to work a little bit harder to manage to get that, but I'm not alone. I, like, have other people are running too.
How long does it take you to do 100 miles? I guess, is it mostly on roads, or do you do off-road?
Yeah, so the 100 is kind of interesting because a year plus ago, I was going through possible hundreds. So my first official pursuit of, like, hey, I want a long-term be able to do 100 was I did a race out of Longmont, Colorado called American Heroes. It's not chair-friendly in the sense that, like, I can't use my racing chair on that course. So I had to, like, change style of chair, adapt, whatever. But that was like, okay, let's go and see that course. That was 24 hours. But then come March of this past year, Pistol Ultra was one that I was going to go to in person. And it's in Tennessee. And they went virtual, which, like, of course, I had the initial response of, like, I'm not going to do anything virtual, like, the whole point. And then with that, I actually was in Tennessee when it was supposed to be happening for my supporting friends for another thing. And then while I was in the hospital getting my central line fixed, I texted one of my best friends, Jason Romero. I was like, so I think I'm going to go for my 100 next week. And Jason's like, sweet, okay. And let's talk this through. So we came up with the whole plan, and I did it in 62 hours. I definitely foresee that I can do it in way under that. Like, I can meet a sub 30. But the challenges I have, it's not just about, like, oh, you can push through this. I have proven that I can push through stupidity and not safety. So, like, it's balancing that aspect for me. So I did 3 long days of running with sleep in between. So it's all about figuring out what's going to be best for me. My favorite thing to focus on is my best friend. Every test, everything, talked before, she says, you're competent, you're capable, you're going to be wildly successful, and it's okay if it looks different. So trying not to compare myself. But that being said, I just had a PR at Wash Park last night of running sub 7-minute miles. And that comes from Base Hydration and Nutrition, mentor support from Base, and Achilles, and just having a whole community of people that take me where I want to go.